Imagine you're just sitting there, cruising along in a commercial airliner at 17,300 feet. You've just taken off, you're sipping your morning tea, skimming the newspaper, and then, out of nowhere, an intensely violent, body-shaking thud literally echoes through the entire cabin. Suddenly, a thick white fog instantly fills the air, and the plane just starts to violently judder and dive. As one passenger actually described it at the time, "I thought it was a bomb." But honestly, what was happening at the very front of that aircraft was way stranger and infinitely more terrifying than anyone on board could have ever guessed. So, welcome to this explainer.
Okay, let's dive into this. Today, we are unpacking one of the absolute most astonishing flying stories I think you will ever hear. We're talking about British Airways Flight 5390. This explainer is all about extreme physics, split-second aeronautical decision-making, and a survival arc that is going to completely change how you view the sheer limits of the human body. We're going to break down exactly how this unprecedented disaster unfolded, literally minute by minute, and look at the unbelievable teamwork that stopped this from becoming a catastrophic tragedy. Section 1. 13 minutes to disaster. It's actually crazy when you look at the stark contrast between how incredibly mundane this flight started and the absolute doom that was just minutes away. To really wrap our heads around the sheer shock of this event, we have to talk about how totally ordinary the start of this day was. It was June 10th, and the crew of the BAC One-Eleven, which, by the way, was an aircraft known back then as the Jeep of the Skies because it was just so incredibly reliable, they were prepping for a completely routine flight from Birmingham, England down to Málaga, Spain. The crew knew each other well, it was super relaxed, they've got 81 passengers on board, 6 crew members carrying 43 tons. And Captain Tim Lancaster actually comes over the intercom with this jovial, laid-back announcement, telling everybody, "What a lovely day in Málaga, blue skies, sunshine, sit back and enjoy the flight." 2 minutes into the climb, the autopilot is on, shoulder straps come off, flight attendants are passing out cups of tea. But they were only 13 minutes into the flight. Section 2. Chaos in the cockpit. Because in a fraction of a second, that piece, gone, shredded, a massive explosion. The captain's windscreen violently, suddenly blows straight out into the open sky. Look at this number, 17,300 feet. That was their exact altitude when the explosive depressurization hit. The immediate massive pressure difference between the comfortable cabin air and the incredibly thin atmosphere outside basically created a giant vacuum. The rushing air instantly pinned Captain Lancaster to the roof of the cockpit, and before literally anyone could blink, he was blasted headfirst out of the window. But his legs remained caught inside. They ended up jamming the control column entirely forward, which instantly disconnected the autopilot and sent this massive commercial jet hurtling into a terrifying steep dive. And that brings us to the next horrific element of this crisis, 390. Inside that cockpit, co-pilot Alistair Atchison, who, get this, had literally just met this crew that very morning, is now suddenly flying a diving jet completely alone, all while battling a blinding, deafening 390-mile-per-hour wind that is just roaring directly through the missing windshield. I mean, the noise was so insanely loud he couldn't even hear air traffic control responding to his frantic distress calls. Meanwhile, outside the aircraft, Captain Lancaster was facing a literally unimaginable environment. So, for every 1,000 feet of altitude, the temperature drops by about 2 degrees Celsius. Pinned to the nose of the plane, diving at nearly 400 miles per hour, he was plunged into freezing temperatures of negative 17 degrees Celsius. He was taking on extreme wind chill, brutal physical trauma, and an immediate, drastic lack of breathable oxygen. His survival time in this kind of environment was measured in mere minutes before his bodily systems would just completely shut down.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute sheer physical desperation inside that cabin. Flight attendant Nigel Ogden rushes into the cockpit and physically grabs the captain's belt right before he vanishes outside completely. But that 390-mile-per-hour suction, it's just way too strong. So Chief Steward John Hayward steps in, and he intentionally smashes the jammed cockpit door to pieces just to create a physical anchor point. They somehow wrench the captain's feet away from the controls, hooking them over the back of the seat. And then finally, Steward Simon Rogers straps himself into a spare jump seat and literally just holds onto the captain's ankles with his bare hands. It's just 3 men forming this desperate human anchor chain against the sky.
Section 3. The impossible decision. Let's slow down for a second here, because we really need to pause and think about the immense, heavy psychological burden suddenly placed on this crew during this horrifying ordeal.
With the captain's feet finally free from the controls, the co-pilot manages to level the aircraft out just a little bit. But as the adrenaline of that initial shock starts to settle, the crew is forced to confront this deeply traumatic reality. Seriously, ask yourself, what do you do with a lifeless body? The guys holding on to Captain Lancaster had reached their absolute physical limits. Their arms were literally going numb. And outside the window, the captain's arms were flailing violently in the wind. His head was battering relentlessly against the side of the aircraft, and his eyes were wide open and completely unblinking. As Nigel Ogan painfully admitted to his colleagues later on, they were absolutely convinced the captain was already dead.
So, this unspoken, horrifying thought passed between them. Did they just let him go? It's a chilling thought, right? But co-pilot Alistair Atchison firmly ordered them to hold on. And listen, this wasn't just some act of compassion. It was a clinical, absolute aeronautical necessity. Think about the physics here. If they released the captain's body, it would have been swept straight back into the leading edge of the wing. Or even worse, it could be sucked directly into the engine. The severe damage caused by that impact could have easily brought down the entire aircraft. So holding on to the captain wasn't just about him, it was literally the only way to save the 87 other lives on board.
Section 4. A blind descent. Now we have to shift our focus entirely to the incredible flying skills required to actually survive this. Co-pilot Alistair Atchison, who had never flown with this crew before today, had to step up and take absolute full command.
Now keep in mind, standard airline pilot training is designed for two conscious pilots communicating and sharing the emergency workload. Alistair was completely alone, deafened by the roar of the wind, with his captain literally hanging out the window. To get this plane out of immediate danger, Alistair executed a staggering maneuver. He intentionally dove the massive passenger jet 11,000 feet in just 2.5 minutes. This extreme, rapid descent was absolutely crucial for two big reasons. First, it quickly got them out of the highly congested commercial air lanes, preventing a mid-air collision, and second, it brought the plane down to an altitude where the air was actually breathable for the terrified passengers, who didn't have nearly enough oxygen masks.
But leveling out at a safe altitude, that was only half the battle. Alistair was navigating entirely blind. Talk about compounding problems. When that windscreen blew out, it took absolutely all the maps, approach charts, and navigational plates straight out the window with it. He initially requested to land at Gatwick, which was an airport he knew really well, but air traffic control knew time was up. They steered him towards Southampton, a place he had never flown into in his entire life. Plus, because they were really only a few minutes into their journey to Spain, the aircraft was completely weighed down with a full tank of fuel. And the crazy thing is, the BAC One-Eleven cannot dump fuel in midair.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer, terrifying mathematical reality of this emergency. Let's contrast these numbers. For a heavy, fully fueled aircraft like the BAC One-Eleven to actually stop safely, it requires a runway length of at least 2,500 meters. But air traffic control calmly informed Alistair that Southampton had a maximum of only 1,800 meters. The co-pilot was deeply concerned that the plane's tires would just burst under the immense weight, or worse, that they would simply careen straight off the end of that short runway. He had to rely entirely on a calm, uninterrupted verbal talk-down from an air traffic controller miles and miles away, guiding him toward a runway he had literally never seen.
Section 5. The final miracle. As the aircraft blindly approaches that dangerously short runway, just 32 minutes after takeoff, you really start to feel the gravity of the situation. We're in completely awestruck territory now.
9 miles out from touchdown, the controller just keeps steadily talking Alistair down until the runway finally appears in his line of sight through those swirling winds. And then, sheer relief. Exactly 32 minutes after takeoff, Alistair Atchison executes what has to be the hardest landing of his entire career. At 8:55 a.m., flight BA 5390 makes a flawless, unprecedented, perfect visual landing at Southampton Airport. He actually manages to stop the heavy plane safely within the 1,800 meters. Emergency services instantly surround the jet. Against every single aeronautic and psychological odds you can think of, there are 0 fatalities among the passengers and the cabin crew. He saved everyone on board. But what about Captain Lancaster? As emergency personnel approached the cockpit to retrieve his frozen, severely battered body, an incredible, miraculous twist happened. Look, his survival time outside that aircraft should have been measured in tens of minutes, tops. The sheer physical violence, the extreme oxygen starvation, the -17-degree wind chill, it absolutely should have been fatal. But as they gently pulled him onto a stretcher, he began to slowly, unbelievably emerge from unconsciousness. He survived. I want to leave you with this final, provocative question. When faced with an unimaginable disaster, where exactly does the physical limit of the human body end and the miracle of teamwork begin?
Without the absolute brute strength of a cabin crew holding on until their arms went dead numb, without the ice-cold precision of a co-pilot flying blind into an unknown, dangerously short runway, and without an almost unexplainable will to survive from the captain himself, this flight would have ended in absolute tragedy. Instead, it remains one of the most stunning testaments to human resilience in aviation history. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and honestly, I hope this incredible story leaves you as completely speechless as it left me. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.
For more crash investigations, subscribe to the channel, like this video and share it. Tell us what to investigate next in the comments. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.
Thank you for watching the Flight Decoder. Subscribe for more authentic aviation investigations. Like this video, share it, and leave your thoughts.